Hey,
Don't
hi.
interrupt us, Shiras. Yeah.
I've got my two little chatty Cathys here.
Yeah,
This is the only time we get to
yeah.
talk to
Catch
you.
up
Get
on
to
old,
interact.
Yeah.
catch up on old times.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good morning. Good morning, everybody. Good morning. I want to first of all thank David Zucker and Jim Abrams for getting up so early on this New Year Day for us Jews. Thank you so much, gentlemen. I am so excited to be interviewing you. When I told my boyfriend, I said, guess what? I'm interviewing the directors from Airplane. He's like, the best movie ever made.
Yeah.
And so he was, which is actually true, because I realized everybody knows lines from this film. Everybody has seen this film. It has lasted 40 years, and it really truly is one of the best films ever made. So I want to first start off by
Can
talking
I just say that I really, really like your boyfriend?
How come he's not on this with us?
He's actually working today, poor guy. But he's going to see this later, so a big shout out to him. But I want to start out with your background of, growing up in the Midwest as, in two Jewish boys in the Midwest. How was that, and what kind of family life did you have? Where were your parents from, and how was your upbringing?
Well, we grew up in the the first suburb north of Milwaukee, which was called Shorewood. And actually, our families were quite close. Our fathers were business partners, and it was called Abrahams and Zucker Real Estate. And our sisters were best friends, and they were college roommates. And our mothers were close, and Jim and Jerry and I, we started really hanging out, not really in high school because we were a little far apart, but I think once I graduated, we started hanging out in our basement in our house in Shorewood, and that's really how it started.
In the Midwest, in the 50s and 60s, bore no resemblance to modern times. Everything was, father knew best, and there were good guys and there were bad guys. I mean, most everything, especially on TV, was portrayed both literally and figuratively in black and white. And we kind of grew up with this instinct, like, there's a little more nuance to life than that, and we don't really have to take all that stuff seriously, do we?
And we would laugh at the serious movies,
Right.
like and television shows,
Right.
and often we would dub in our own voices, and that really was the kind of the origins of this style, whatever it is.
Yeah, I actually did some research and heard about that you would take these old movies, these old B movies, and dub them. Do you still have access to these, or tell us about that whole thing?
Well,
yeah, go ahead, Jim.
Well, there's one really funny, where we taped a country western, a kind of older guys country western band off of TV. And this is back in the day when nobody taped things on TV, but we had access to some equipment. And when the shot starts on a tight shot of a guitar, and you see this guy playing, and it pulls out, and you see the country western, kind of dorky country western guys playing the song, and we dubbed over it a song called Inagata Vida. And I don't know if you remember that, but at the time it was like the hippest, coolest, most outrageous song of its day. And
then we got a hold of some early home video equipment, which no one had access to it. I mean, now with everybody on a cell phone has, completely 100% quality, color, everything. But back in 1971, it was, if you wanted to do video, it was a huge reel-to-reel tape deck with a big camera that kind of went over your shoulder, and then we started taping sketches at our house, and often starring my mom. So, and we combined that with a live show, which Jerry and our other partner Dick Chudnow were preparing in Madison. So, and then we combined and we put it into one show. So we
One,
had
one of the skits that we did, we reenacted back then, was there was a movie called Love Story with Ally McGraw, you
Oh,
know,
yeah.
really sappy. And we reenacted a scene where she's in the hospital dying, and her boyfriend comes to visit her.
Right.
And she says to him, "How are you doing?" And he says, "Well, I got this kink in the back of my neck." And he starts to bitch about the kink in his neck, and he's dying.
But it was all done deadpan. No one was
Right.
trying to be funny. And I think that's really the origins
Yeah.
of the whole style. We just, we would just crack ourselves up. And, it turned out audiences seemed to like it also.
So you had a theater company, I believe, before you came to Los Angeles, right? And you brought that theater company to Los Angeles?
Right. It was, we called it Kentucky Fried Theater. And it was on Regent Street near Camp Randall in Madison. And we remodeled a storage room in the back of a bookstore, kind of a bookstore coffee place, an early Starbucks, but too bad this guy didn't take it nationally. But so we had a 70-seat theater, and we put a little stage and we crammed people in, and we did this show for a year in Madison, and then it was packed all the time. I mean, I think we did 2 shows Friday and 2 shows Saturday, but we could only charge $1 admission. So we decided to move out to LA so we could get discovered.
Mm-hmm.
Our goal actually, go ahead, Jim.
We had a goal of being on the Tonight Show. That was our ultimate goal in moving to Los Angeles. And we eventually made it onto the Tonight Show.
And we're not very impressive.
Yeah, I mean, up until for the first few decades after we were on the Tonight Show, every time I'd go back to Milwaukee, I had to apologize to people who stayed up late that night.
So you had this theater company in LA, and you were doing, how many members were part of the company, and who came out to see these sketch comedy?
The theater was on Pico Boulevard in LA, and it was twice the size of the Madison Theater. And again, it was called Kentucky Fried Theater. We ran a show we called the show Vegetables, and then our next show was called My Nose. And so that to get publicity, our weekly listing in the LA Times calendar section read, "My nose runs continuously." So that was kind of our, way of being clever. And but that was packed very quickly also.
Yeah. At the very beginning, we had no publicity budget or anything. So at the very beginning, and right above the theater was the apartment where we lived. And at the beginning, the audience would be so small that we'd do the show, and then afterwards, we'd take them upstairs and give them a tour of our apartment.
We did that before the show, actually, because we had to break the ice, because it was like 15 people in the audience, and it was just, we couldn't imagine being up on stage performing for that few number of people. So
we outnumbered them.
We outnumbered them, yeah. And then, but we would do all sorts of things to try to get publicity, because we had no budget. There was a huge billboard in the empty lot next to the theater, and it was advertising various things. It would change every month, and so we rented it for 1 month or for 2 weeks, and we wrote a big sign called, on it on the billboard saying, "This is it, Kentucky Fried Theater." But that wasn't much in itself. But then we organized a huge neighborhood protest against it, and we invited the media. When the media got there, they were told that a huge corporation planned to tear down the sign and plant a tree in its place. And the neighborhood was protesting and carrying placards saying "Save the sign." And so they did interviews, and it was on on ABC TV in LA. And after that, we were packed every night.
And so I heard that Lorne Michaels at one point came and saw your show. When did that happen? And did you meet him that day?
Yes, that was in 1975, early 75 when we were doing My Nose. And he came to the show with the vice president of NBC named Dick Ebersol. And I mean, we met, I remember we met him. We were just told, these are these big TV guys from New York that are coming to see the show. And we thought they were looking for writers or something. Well, they actually were, and performers. And then I read this in a book that was written about Saturday Night Live, that Lorne Michaels told Dick Ebersol at the show, this is what I want to do on national TV, Kentucky Fried Theater. So, and they did. And I mean, it was, you know, they just did a great job. We of course had the idea before. We went to our agent, and the agent said, well, no, that'll never work. So that was pretty stupid of us to listen to an agent, which we did at the time.
Well, hopefully you have a different agent now.
Yes, well, we've had many different agents that we've fired since then. Yeah.
And so, so how did you
One time we were on the beach. We were on the beach in Santa Monica and ran into our agent. And he said, don't I know you from somewhere?
So how did you guys?
Yes, I'm your client. Yeah.
How did you guys go from the Kentucky Fried Theater to pitching, and how did you get the opportunity to even pitch the Kentucky Fried movie? Which, by the way, when I was 13, I bought a ticket to see a different movie at the Town and Country Encino movie theaters. And my friend and I snuck into it. We bought a ticket because it was, you know, we weren't old enough to get in. So we bought the ticket for the other movie and then snuck into Kentucky Fried Movie.
It was R-rated, yes.
Yeah, it was. We, John Landis had just made a movie called Schlock back like in 74, it must have been, or something. Yeah. And David called John up and invited him to see the theater. And John came to Kentucky Fried Theater and watched the show and said, you guys should make a movie of this. And we said, how do you make a movie? And he said, well, you need a script. And we said, well, how do you write a script? What does a script look like? And so he gave us a script that he had written, which turned out to have been American Werewolf in London. And we kind of copied that format and used and wrote a script for a Kentucky Fried Movie based on our show at Kentucky Fried Theater.
Well, actually, the first script that we wrote was Airplane. We wrote a version of an early version of Airplane, and then I think that we were going to have Landis direct it because we didn't know about directing. So, but we couldn't get backing for it. And then again, Landis came to see our show again and said, why don't you do a movie of your show? And by that time, Ken Shapiro had done a sketch movie called Groove Tube. And we went to our agent. I think this is another agent. And we said, well, we want to do a sketch movie like Ken Shapiro's Groove Tube, which would be a lot of different bits in a movie. And she said, no, that's not a good idea because Ken Shapiro's already done it. Anyways, so this time we didn't listen to the agent, and we went ahead. We wrote Kentucky Fried Movie, and we got the financing for that from a exhibition chain called United Artists Theater Circuit up in San Francisco. And what we did was we made a 10-minute short consisting of 10 minutes, which would eventually be in Kentucky Fried Movie. And they played it in their theaters and the audiences laughed. So it's like, duh, okay, we'll invest in this. So that budget was about $650,000, and we got to make Kentucky Fried Movie. And it was a hit because it didn't have to make that much to make its money back.
Right. What was the budget for Airplane?
$3.5 million.
Yeah.
$3.5 million.
Yeah.
And so after you made Kentucky Fried Movie, then how do you guys shift into pitching to these studios about this film, and tell me about that whole process? How did you have the connections after Kentucky Fried Movie to get that?
Well,
No.
Surprisingly not, yeah.
We kept, sort of refining the script and shopping it around town, but nobody was in the least bit interested in it. And finally, there was a guy named Michael Eisner who ran Paramount Studios. And he was friendly with a woman who is a reader, they call it script reader, at Universal. And Michael was at a party with her or something and said to her, "Have you read anything good lately?" And she said, "Yeah, I read this movie called Airplane, and I really laughed, and it's great." So Michael tracked us down and we went in and met with them. And that's how we wound up at Paramount and making Airplane there.
But that turned out to be really fortunate because I remember when we went to Paramount, it was a big studio and, they had suggestions, they had comments, they wanted to change the script. And at first we were frightened by this because, this was our baby and we kind of regarded it as it's the big bad studio is going to come in and ruin it or something. But Eisner assigned a guy named Jeff Katzenberg to kind of supervise a rewrite. And he got a guy to sit with us and we did rewrite the script and it got a lot better. So we kind of learned that studios can actually be good. And everybody at Paramount was great.
Yeah.
Was there any instances where you felt you really had to stick up for yourselves and stick to your guns on suggestions that what they were making? And how did you guys approach that?
They never really, until the dailies started coming in, could wrap their heads around the idea of casting straight actors in a comedy. Like they did Why Robert Stack and Leslie and Peter Graves and Lloyd Bridges. They would repeatedly suggest comedians, Dom DeLuise or whatnot.
Or Chevy Chase or Bill Murray. Yeah.
Right. And we had to stick to our guns. And it really wasn't, fortunately, on the first day of filming, we filmed a scene in the cockpit where Leslie Nielsen says, "And don't call me Shirley." And that's when the phone started to ring. And that's what I didn't realize it. I think David and Jerry realized it, but they had the right to fire us as directors after 2 weeks if they didn't like what we were doing.
Yeah.
But of course, after they saw Leslie in that line, they all of a sudden they got it, what we were up to, and they were very supportive. And we were told that as time went by, the dailies rooms would be more and more packed with Paramount executives who were so anxious just to see what we'd shot the day before.
Yeah, the editing on comedy is so key. Can you guys talk a little bit about the timing of landing these jokes and playing around with the editing? And also, what was scripted and what wasn't?
Well, everything was scripted. There were I can remember anything that was thought up on the set. There was certainly never any ad libs because this is not the comedy where you let Jim Carrey or Kevin Hart just go and riff on stuff. It was all in the script. And Jim and Jerry and I would, we would, I don't mean argue, but we would discuss every word. I mean, we really fine-tuned it. So, when it came to be on the set, it was exactly like it was in the script. Occasionally, we would add some things. I think we added more slapping when the woman who panics.
Yeah.
And I think the actress herself, suggested, you can slap me harder or more, or something like that, or whatever she was into at the time. But what we did was we added the line of people following with the gun and the knife and the whips and the chains and the baseball bat. That line was added. And at the end of the movie, when Mrs. Pilot pops up, that was suggested by, I think, the special effects guy on the set. And so we did that and we thought that was a good idea, but there was certainly nothing ad-libbed. People would crack up sometimes saying their lines, not because our lines were so funny, but because Leslie Nielsen would bring this little fart machine onto the set, and he would make all these fart noises right in the middle of a line, mostly to Bob Hayes. And so Bob Hayes, we couldn't figure out why Hayes kept cracking up in the middle of his lines.
And it was so unprofessional.
Yeah. and so, but just before we fired him, we found out that it was Leslie doing his fart machine.
Yeah, and it wound up, there was so many unprofessional things that Bob did. This was just one more in the procession.
Oh, we wanted to fire him every day.
Right.
Yeah.
But there were contractual obligations.
And it wasn't just because of the bad acting. What were you going to say, Jim?
Right.
Contractual. I have to interrupt. So I can see who is watching, and there is somebody named Robert Hayes that has the same spelling. It's Hays, and I'm wondering if you are the same Robert Hayes. I'm gonna send you the Zoom link. Can you join us if you are the same Robert Hayes? I would love to have him, and hopefully he can spill the tea about you guys. Oh yes, it is.
Oh, there he is.
Hi,
Bob. We were just talking about how great you were.
How many times were you going to fire me? I didn't realize.
I think I was just joking.
My whole career was hanging by a thread the whole time.
Yes.
I didn't know it.
No, you were great, Bob. Yeah.
No, seriously. Yeah, seriously.
Actually, I want to.
Hi, fellas.
Hi, Bob.
I was watching the film again, and I was really kind of watching it more carefully, because I've seen it a million times. But I love these little moments that, and now I don't know if you directed the actors, but they're doing their gag, and then, or somebody does a gag, and then there's this like kind of really second take that's like out of their subtext of, you can see what that actor is thinking about that other character, and they're very, very slight and very subtle, but they're so powerful and so funny. And Robert, you did a lot of those in the movie, even like, breaking the fourth wall and talking to the camera. They were done so brilliantly. Can you guys talk about directing all the actors?
Well, let me tell you about a couple of things. One, we directed. I mean, when Bob turns the camera and says, what a pisser. After this whole thing. But the other one, a lot of them Bob just did on his own. He really did add these things. And the one that I always think of, that I love every time I see it, is when Bob says to the stewardess and Leslie Nielsen, it's an entirely different kind of flying altogether. And both of them say in unison, it's an entirely different kind of flying. And then when we cut to Hayes, he does this little take, like,
yes.
Okay, and then plunges on and keeps going. But
yes,
that he got it. And I always love that little thing, yeah.
There's a lot of little moments like that.
I probably shouldn't say anything, but actually it's because I was just so confused the whole time we were filming.
Oh, all this time I thought it was brilliant acting.
It's just confusion.
Yes.
Just confusion. Yeah.
The other thing that was helpful,
who's calling who?
That's all. The other thing that was helpful is that we screened the movie a lot during post-production. And that allowed us to, there are times, especially like when Kareem grabs the little boy and says, tell your dad to drag Walton and then you're up and down the court and stuff. And when the other boy, the girl says to the boy, I take it black like my men.
Yeah.
Both times those reaction shots were extended because we previewed the movie and we could see the audience and hear the audience react to those reactions.
And those laughs went right through, like when the little boy, after Kareem kind of lets him go, he just stares. The guy just stares, and that laugh lasted all the way through that take.
I think that was Rossi Harris, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Rossi Harris.
Rossi Harris, yeah. I think he's still, mentally disturbed because of that scene today.
Well, I think I read one interview he did. He said he didn't get it at the time, but I think by the time the movie came out, somebody explained to him what all that was about with Peter Graves.
Yeah, I think that it's interesting how you have to almost, like in theater, you have to hold for the laughs and
Yeah.
let them digest. It almost is kind of the same. With,
And yet not too long, because then it goes flat.
right.
Too much.
But finding
How many
that
times now, you guys, didn't you guys, I went with you a couple of times. Remember at Grauman's Chinese Theater, we stood in the back and we listened to them. But how many times did you go to theaters and listen to the audience, and then you go back and you do a little shaving, a little cutting, extending or shortening or whatever?
I think we screened the movie in front of college audiences. That was before there was sophisticated market research. And we knew sort of the heart of the audience was college-age kids. And so we previewed it, I think at UC Santa Barbara and at Harvard and the University of Wisconsin, all in front of college audiences. And then we do Q&As afterwards, all during the post-production period.
But we would make an audio tape of the reaction, and then once back in the cutting room, then we would trim the scenes to fit the laughs, so that we wouldn't.
I think David and Jerry and I were both all scarred by the experience of performing live on stage in Kentucky Fried Theater, and none of us was ever comfortable as an actor on stage. So we learned how to, if it doesn't get laughs, get rid of it or shorten it. So, and that was sort of a self-preservation thing.
Yeah, it's. I think it's hard. You know, so many of the artists are always so married and to their material that they have a hard time separating from it sometimes when it needs to be.
That was
writers
that was Jim's
as an
first
actor
marriage to his material.
But you have that, I've had that experience with writers, but when you have writers that actually, with the boys, when they were actually performers, they know what it's like as a performer. They're much more ready to adjust it and make it so that it's nice and tight, instead of saying, wait a minute, I wrote those words, they can't go. Because I'd worked on projects with those, those kinds of writers too. So that was really good. It was really.
And it really helped during the writing that we were so close to that audience experience. So as we were writing, I mean, we were just imagining how this movie would play for a real audience.
Yeah. And was it received back in, because this is the 40-year anniversary, how did the audiences receive it back then?
They loved it. I mean, the movie was a hit, as I believe, as I remember. Yeah.
It seems like it broke the box office records at every theater played in across the country. Yeah. I mean, theater after theater after theater.
Yeah, there were lines, literally lines around the block at the theaters. And
I was sort of apprehensive. We wrote the Black Dudes and filmed it, and and it's sort of interesting, especially today, to look back at those scenes and how they play then and now. And I was a little scared. Was this like racist if we had subtitled these black guys? And in fact, we came up with the idea to subtitle them after we saw a movie called Shaft, the 1975 blaxploitation movie, which was a good movie starring Richard Roundtree. And we went to see it and liked it, but we walked out of the theater and said, what were they saying? We couldn't understand what the actors were saying. That was sort of the origin of that joke. So then we went ahead and made an Airplane and did those scenes with the black guys. And when the movie was just opening, we went to see the movie with black audiences. And interestingly, the black audiences seemed to laugh at those jokes more than white people did. So we thought about it a lot over the years. And I think sort of what gets the laugh is the stupid white guy subtitles. The black guys are talking and we're writing golly and stuff like that. And maybe what that really speaks to is the reason the black audiences laughed at that is it speaks to the tone deafness of the white world to the whole black experience.
Mhm.
And maybe what that, and of course that was never, we weren't political and never thought about it back then, but perhaps that's what that positive reception was about.
Yeah. Well, I think also you don't just have those two Black characters. You have other Black actors and other roles that are of all different socioeconomic levels. So it kind of levels the playing field that you're not just, doing this caricature. It's just the joke is the joke. And then you have all representation throughout
Right.
the film.
Right.
Yeah, that's how I felt about that also. But I'm just a Jewish girl from the Valley. I don't know.
Well, I must say that's part of the reason we felt comfortable doing that joke is because we're just three Jewish boys from Milwaukee, and there's that joke that says, you want this leaflet, little tiny leaflet, famous Jewish sports legends. So if we can get one off on the Jews, we can go anywhere.
Yeah, you don't hold back on anyone over that. Robert, I want to just ask you real quick. So how was it working with these directors? How did they work
what it's
with
like? You want to ask what it was like to represent the white adult male, non-Jewish white adult male, and that was Ted Stryker represented the white adult, but talked forever and was a dimwit.
But let me know their process of because we have a lot of filmmakers that we really engage with a lot of filmmakers at our festival. We kind of toot our own horn for being a filmmakers first festival. So maybe kind of talk about how they worked with you on set and with the direction and.
Well, this was one of the early. I don't know if this is the first time or is very early on, I think, and the boys could say, but of having a multiple director, in this case, three people directing the film. But wasn't it? This was one of the first times, and the whole process of going through what you had to go through, which I think is kind of interesting. You had to go to court just about.
Well, we went. The Directors Guild was steeped in this tradition of one man, one film, which was invented by Frank Capra. And here we were. We wanted a 3-man directing credit, and they didn't want to give it to us. They said, just pick one, and we didn't want to do that. So we went through a lot of board meetings of the DGA, and they just wouldn't give it to us. And finally, we got an idea, and Jerry went down to the LA City Hall and had his name legally changed to Abrahams and Zuckers, and applied that way, and he got a DGA card. And when they found out about it, they were furious, and so I think they were trapped, so they had to cave in and give us the 3-man director's credit. That's why I think for the first 3 weeks, the Clapper board says Abrahams and Zuckers for the director.
And so how does being on set listening to 3 different directors go?
For me, the thing about these guys is that it's like one head with 3 bodies, and a lot of times what they do is maybe Jim would start the sentence and David would say the middle of the sentence and Jerry would say the end of the sentence. So they knew they were so much on the same wavelength, and we had it set up so Jerry was out next to the camera like your normal director situation, and then Jim and David would be back in a booth, if you have a little booth or a trailer on the set when you're on the sound stage, or in a little trailer when we were on location, and they would have a monitor set up with the tape around it so they could see what the screen's going to be in the theater. You don't see what the cameraman sees with all the things that almost come in to film. They just had it taped off. And then after they said cut, then they'd all get together and talk about what is it good, and then they would say it. I guess Jerry was the designated speaker to the actors, but oftentimes all 3 guys would tell you. And it was great. It was incredible. It's still the best, the #1 top experience for me. And that was my first feature film. So of 25 or whatever that I've done, but it was the best. So I'm sure that there can be nightmare situations out there, but this one was great. This was really terrific.
Did David and Jim, did you ever have to kind of duke out for something that you had to fight for? How did you work out that relationship with the three of you?
Well, the nice thing is there were three of us. So when push came to shove, we could vote. And, you know, there's always a majority one way or the other. And we had ways of overriding the vote. I mean, we had this rule called quacking. So if you really are passionate and you get outvoted, if you quack enough, then we'll try to do another version, stuff like that. But pretty much, and, you know, we lived with that script for the better part of 6 years. So we were so, and not one word was ever written when we were all in the room together. So we were so on the same page and our instincts were so much the same that rarely was there a dispute by the time we got to the set.
I don't recall any disputes on the set, because if somebody wanted it another way or didn't like a take, we would do another take, and you know, nobody ever said no, there's no time for that or anything. I mean, we were so used to working with each other as a trio that and so much of the directing is done before you get to the set.
Right.
You know,
That also was for me. I remember one time it was a shot. It was in the plane on the, I was in the cockpit or it was back in the passenger area, but it's cut and you guys talked about it and said, okay, that's good. And I was kind of sitting there with agonizing a little bit over it. And you said, what, you want another take? And I thought, this is my first film. And I thought, gee, I don't want to cause trouble and I don't want it to run long and we run over budget all because of me. And that's all what I'm thinking about. And they said, do you want another cut? And I said, well, you know, maybe, oh yeah, okay, well, let's do another take. So we did another take and they said, yeah, that was better. Good, okay, good. Okay, now we move on. And that's the way that it was. We all worked together so well, everyone on the whole. I think for just about everybody that I can imagine on the set, that was one of the best experiences they ever had in the filmmaking. It was fun every day. Couldn't wait to get to work every day.
And I know that, you know, back then it wasn't really popular to put a lot of television actors in films. I mean, now it's done all the time. Did you have to really fight for everyone with the casting?
Well, we were very, very fortunate. Among the other, we always talk when we refer to Airplane, we feel like the seas divided. Everything at the end of the day fell into place. I mean, from finding 0 Hour when we did in the early 70s to Jimmy Carter boycotting the Olympics in 1980 on our release date. We thought we were going to get pummeled by the Olympics, but then Carter boycotted the Olympics. So everything wound up happening right. One of the real fortunate things was that Michael Eisner assigned Howard Koch to be the executive producer of Airplane. And Howard was a past president of the Academy and been president of Paramount Studios. He was a very revered Hollywood guy. And so he was sort of our face and the advocate, you know, when it was, and he had worked with Stack and Bridges and Graves and all those guys during his career. So he had a great deal of credibility and he helped sell us to them and sell Airplane to them.
And Robert, when you first read the script, did you get the genre? Aww.
That's just jumping up, and there are 2 of them here, and they're my girlfriend's little dogs.
So did you get the genre of this film and understand how to deliver these lines when you first read it, or did it take?
I read it on a plane. I read it on a plane going from LA to Minneapolis, St. Paul. And there was something on every single page, and I don't exaggerate when I say it, on every single page, there was something that made me react out loud. I mean, whether it was a full out belly laugh or it was, you know, even a laugh like that, something out loud on every single page. And the stewardess came up who looked a lot like Elaine. If you imagine Elaine with her hair up in a bun and very puckery, you know, like a prune, very, you know, stiff. And she said, I couldn't help but notice you seem to enjoy what you're reading. I was wondering what it was. I said, well, it's a script. I'm going to go meet the people this week. And so I was reading the script. Would you like to read it? And she said, that would be nice. Afterwards, I gave her the script, and she had that little seat that dropped down right behind the captain's cabin. And I noticed her sitting there, so prim, so proper, her knees all together, and made a little lap so she could read it. And a little while later, I saw her sort of giggling a little bit. And then a little while later, I'd look down the aisle and I'd see her starting to really laugh. A little while later, her hair was undone, her knees were splayed everywhere, and she was laughing raucously. And I thought, wow, this is not just me. Somebody else thinks it's funny too. So, and then I went and met the guys.
But, and I got to add too that it was sort of a unique take on comedy at the time. But when Bob came in to read, he never played it big and comedic. He always managed to find that area where it was funny, but he always played it straight. And that was his instinct with this comedy from the get-go.
And when Bob read, we knew, oh my God, we have our striker. This guy can do it. And then we went to tell him a week later that he got the part, and it was on the set. Bob was doing a sitcom called Angie.
Yeah.
And so we told him, and he was all excited and everything. And then I think he said, do you want to stay to see the show? And we said, oh, sure. So we saw the show and we said, oh my God, what have we done?
No, you guys had to get back.
Yeah.
You said, well, we got to go now. And I said, okay. And we were jumping around like little kids behind the psych, back behind the stage. So you left. And I think Jim told me later, as you were walking back together, you said, you know, maybe we should watch this show. And then you went back and watched an episode and thought, oh my God, what have we done? But the thing that's interesting to me, what Jim was just saying, a lot of the comedy that I was doing, it just seems to be sort of developed that way, was that for me, and on this, it seemed to me like I was, aside from the fact that I bored everybody to death, I was the guy who was in the center of this storm of insanity. And I was reacting to how insane everything. I would say something, and then people would answer me, and I'd kind of look at it like, kind of nuts, you know, and so that's where that came from me. In my mind was that's the way it seemed to me.
Yeah.
That's brilliant.
And Bob was often confused by his own lines. So he would go, I guess the foot's on the other hand now, isn't it, Kramer? And then think about what he said. And that got a laugh.
Yeah, and those are the moments that I was talking about earlier, that they're in there, and it really is coming out of the actor, and it's like the subtextual reaction from themselves that just gets that extra laugh. I love it.
That's what they wrote. I mean, that's what the guys wrote. So all we're doing as the actors, all we were doing was just doing what they wrote, and they wanted it straight. They didn't want, you know, it's kind of, I always had said it's like your little astral projection of yourself. And you stand outside, and a lot of comedy that you see, the little astral projection is talking to the audience and saying, isn't this funny? And with our characters, when we're doing it, ours was looking at the audience saying, what are you laughing at? This stuff is serious stuff. And I think that was the difference. That's what they wanted, and that's what made it work. You know, otherwise I think that would have fallen flat.
But there's certain moments actually, like from you and from Robert Stack, where a character does something like the gay character, and they just look at them like, and then they get back to the script. I love those moments.
I think of Bob Stack when Lloyd goes screaming and jumps out of the window. And one of my favorite moves in the whole thing is when he's looking at that, and he turns back and looks at the camera and then turns and does his, I think that's when you guys said, we want your Elliot Ness look here. And that
we were like years and years of watching The Untouchables. And yeah, I remember, I mean, because, you know, we're still, even though we'd already done Kentucky Fried Movie, we're still these guys fresh from Milwaukee. So I remember when we actually did get Robert Stack cast, he actually agreed to be in it. And so I called my sister, who was, you know, living in Connecticut then, and she said, "Oh, I can't believe you get to tell Elliot Ness what to do." You know, so because we still thought of him as that guy. But, you know, when you meet Robert Stack, he was just full of jokes, and he would tell, and he came down to the first table read, and he had these half bifocal glasses and this cardigan sweater. He didn't look like Elliot Ness at all. I don't know about you, Jim, but I expected like a machine gun or something that he would bring to the read.
Right. And for
Is
those
that where
who
the
don't know
glasses came out of?
what you're referring to, Elliot Ness was on the FBI. That's our introduction to Robert Stack in the 50s and 60s.
He was the guy that, wasn't he the guy that brought down Capone or captured Capone?
Oh, in real life, yeah. But there was one of the early TV series.
Right.
Was the FBI starring.
Called The Untouchables. It was called The Untouchables. I think the FBI was
Right.
with Ephraim Zimbalist.
You're right.
And at the time, Ephraim Zimbalist was a bigger name than Leslie Nielsen. And I think we may have gone to him for the doctor. I think there were like 4 actors who turned it down before we got to Leslie.
And so when Leslie came on, did he get it right away?
Yeah, I think at one of the reads there was a little, he was doing a little winking because he knew it was a comedy. So, but he got the joke. But I think we gave him a VHS tape of 0 Hour.
Right.
And
Explain
when
about
he came
that.
back, pardon me?
Explain about 0 Hour, because we haven't covered that yet.
Yeah, this was this 1957 black and white movie, which had the exact same plot. You know, a guy with PTSD goes up in a plane. He's, you know, chasing his wife, as it was in 0 Hour, and there's food poisoning, and everybody who ate fish gets sick, including all the pilots, and the guy has to fly down the plane. It was the exact same thing. And so, and it has the doctor character. All the characters were the same. There wasn't much original about that. We kind of added the jokes. But we sent that, and it was like this hard-hitting acting style that had kind of disappeared. It wasn't quite that stiff in the 70s, but they still had all those airport movies, and those were pretty dead serious also, and ripe for parody. So so that's what everything was modeled on 0 Hour. In fact, Jim and Jerry and I actually wanted to do the movie in black and white and on a prop plane.
Oh, wow.
And fortunately, you know, the head of Paramount, Michael Eisner, talked us out of it.
You know, that actually makes me, I was thinking about this the other day. There's a style of theater that's happening now where, you know, you have the 2 main characters and then clowns that play all the different characters. Have you ever thought of, or has anybody ever approached you about Airplane being a theater play?
Well, they've done this readers theater of it every year for, I don't know how many years, David, up at Tree People.
At Tree People, they do a table read of Airplane, and it's very entertaining. And on a lot of the years, Bob and I have gone to do a Q&A after it. You know, Bob and I constantly needing attention. You know, we show up at anything like that. Yeah.
Well, I think you guys were definitely you created this genre pretty much. And I mean, I even remember watching, I'm like, when I was watching the film again, I'm like, oh yeah, they even have the gratuitous, you know, tit shot. And I don't think anybody did that before in films, you know, the gratuitous naked girl. And, you know, you really started a whole genre that has been carried on for so many years. And who do you, we have a question from the audience. Who do you see taking on that torch of this kind of comedy and taking it to the next level and moving on in future years?
Yeah, me. I've got 2 scripts. I'm waving my hands in the end zone. I'm open. Somebody pass me the ball, but this stuff will come back. It's still funny. You know, Jim and Jerry and I and Bob show the movie all over the country. and it's still funny. The airplane still gets laughed. There's no reason why this comedy couldn't be done, you know, today in 2020. I mean, once people can leave their homes, and so yeah, it's absolutely doable.
I think just last year and a half ago, in January, no, it was just past January, they showed at Sketchfest, wasn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, before the.
Did they show? Was it?
Yeah.
What do we show? Airplane?
We showed at Sketchfest, and we showed they showed Airplane, and
Oh, yeah.
we went up there, and you and Julie and I went up there,
Yeah.
and I thought that audience, they reacted to it as big.
Yes,
as,
that's what I thought.
as when it first came out.
Yeah, and it's a
Wow.
1,300 seat theater. It was packed. They turned people away.
Yeah.
People still want to laugh, and this genre, this kind of movie, still makes people laugh. I mean, it can be done today. So, if you know anyone,
I'll send them your way.
send them my. Yeah, I have 2 scripts that I want to do. Yeah.
I mean, I also realized, the scene where Robert, when you're in the hospital and you're talking about the other guy thinking is Ethel Merman, and then it cuts to Ethel Merman. I was thinking, that Snickers commercial. I wonder if they got the inspiration, because you know how they cut to and it's Betty White.
Right.
I'm wondering if they stole that from you.
Yes, they probably did. Airplane has influenced everybody. It was the Farrelly brothers. Was it that they said they owe their career to you guys?
Well, not so much that they did love our movies.
Yeah.
But I read an interview with Pete Farrelly, who said the reason that they came out here was because, he and his brother Bobby were writing movies and scripts. They had stuff that they were writing back in Rhode Island. But it wasn't but they never thought of coming out to LA. So, and they loved Airplane and Kentucky Fried Movie. And so one night they were watching Letterman, and I guess Jerry and Jim and I were guests on Letterman on his old show at NBC. And Pete Farrelly called his brother into the room and say, "Bobby, look at this. These guys, these are the guys who did Airplane, Kentucky Fried Movie. They're just like us." They had imagined, evidently, that we were these drugged out maniac Hollywood guys, and we were just, these guys from the Midwest. So, and they did, like a month later, they came out to LA.
Yeah, well, the Farrellys have always been very complimentary in talking about us and the influence we had on their career. But I've noticed over the years that when their profit participation statements come out, suddenly you don't hear a word about us. And I wonder, all we want to do is like dip our beak a little bit.
Yeah.
And
they've never shared anything with us.
Exactly so.
Yeah.
Well, then you went on to do some more films.
Ungrateful jerks.
Jerks.
Yeah.
We
I
ate
hope they
them.
see this. Yeah.
I want to talk a little bit about basketball and also the Naked Gun series. You worked with, Trey Parker from South Park.
Yeah.
That was, I'm trying to figure out the timing. That was after, how much after South Park came out did you work with him?
South Park had just come out, I think. It was in the first couple of months of South Park, and those guys were really getting known. And so we thought, hey, how about putting these guys in a movie? And they were great. I loved working with them. Yeah.
But you guys have gone on to do some serious movies. You didn't only stay in comedy. Do you prefer to come back to comedy, or what is your preference?
Well, I prefer comedy. I've produced some serious movies. I produced a movie called Walk in the Clouds and another one called Phone Booth. But I'm not interested in directing any of that. I thought they were kind of interesting, quirky movies. And to do an entire movie in a phone booth, it was intriguing. But I still want to do comedy, and I can still do it. So
there's nothing.
Bob is willing to act in them, so Why not?
There's nothing quite like working on a comedy movie and remembering everything that went into it, and when you thought of the joke, and filming the joke, and then sitting in an audience. And when you're a writer or director, you can do that anonymously, and just sitting in the audience and hearing the laughter. I mean, that's sort of like the ultimate perk of the comedy movie business.
You can do a comedy and you can do a drama, and the comedy, it succeeds if they laugh, and if they don't laugh, it didn't work. But with a drama, if they come out and they say that was horrible, and you say, oh, you just didn't get it. so you can always fake that one. I remember starting out in the theater, and I'd be doing a play, and you go for weeks and months at a time, and you think, God, this is so heavy. I can't wait to do a comedy. And then you'd be doing a comedy and you're going on for months, and you say, oh, I can't wait to get out and do a drama. So you just, I think the thing about the comedies are, in the long run, you make people feel so good. You make them laugh, I've had people come up and tell me, anytime I'm down, I just put on Airplane and it makes me feel good. Oh, and soon after it came out, I had a meeting with the producer, and he said, first things before I say anything, and this was just within a week or 2 weeks or whatever of it coming out, he said, the first thing I got to tell you is, my friends called me up and said, we're going to take you to see a movie. And I said, no, I don't want to say anything. I was in a foul mood, and said, we're on our way over. I'm not going. And they dragged him out, and they went to see Airplane, and he laughed so hard. He said that now if I get in a foul mood, I'm going to put on that show. And so thank you. Now, I'd like you to be in my film. So, or gee, let me see if I want you in my film. I can't remember what it was. Maybe he didn't cast me, but he enjoyed the fact that, the film made him laugh.
Yeah.
And that's a lot of people that do that.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, I think you have a psychological, your chemistry, actually, when you smile or laugh, your chemistry in your brain changes. My dad used to drive around the 101 in smiling at everybody, and I'd always be hitting him. Dad, stop smiling. You're embarrassing me. Stop smiling. But he knew that he'd put these people in a better mood if he was smiling at them. It was really wonderful. Yeah, I have a question actually.
Jerry and Dave always told me it was the drugs. They said it just seemed to.
Somebody wants me to ask you about the audience at Harvard. Do you understand that question?
Yeah, I do. It was, well, my recollection, so it's got to be 79. So maybe my recollection isn't completely accurate, but back then, at least, they had this, they didn't like to acknowledge, these kids, Harvard kids, didn't like to acknowledge a joke with laughter. And so they would like whistle. That's what they did. They would whistle. So you do a joke and they would whistle. And we thought they hated the movie. And so in the Q&A afterwards, somebody explained to us that they didn't want to give us the recognition that they really enjoyed the joke. That's my recollection.
I have another question saying, in today's very PC, we did kind of touch on this, but we can maybe talk a little bit more about it. In today's very PC careful world, can the same film be greenlit?
No. No, it could. They would never greenlight Airplane today. I mean, I get asked this question, like, could you do Airplane today? And I often say, of course we could, just without the jokes. But it's like everything's become so overly sensitive that, I mean, just go through the script. You can check off almost any really funny joke, and it can't be done because people are too sensitive. So that's too bad. I don't know what to do about it except to kill all people who don't get humor.
So in your new script, that brings me to your new scripts that you've written, David. How are they written, and how?
Well, the new script is a spoof on a genre of movie. the international spy thriller genre, which has never been done in our style. So we're not really doing a commentary on social mores or pop culture of today. It's all spoof of a movie genre. Like you know, when Mike Myers did Austin Powers, you know, he didn't do any contemporary stuff. It was a spoof on really the same thing, but it was done in Mike Myers style, which was very funny and very successful. But you can often do, maybe a romantic comedy would be harder to do because you touch on these sensitive contemporary subjects. But my scripts are all, and the other script I have it's all set in the film noir era. So there's nothing in it that is it doesn't touch on any of these hot button topics.
And I think the other thing is that not only were, I mean, you wouldn't get away with pedophilia in a movie today, but not only were there those jokes, but there was something very unique about having Stack and Bridges and Graves in a movie, because these were all guys who were in their 50s or 60s who had entire careers being dramatic actors. And suddenly they were they were the brunt of the joke a little bit. They were having a laugh at their own expense. And I don't think you could cast a movie like that today. I don't think there are people who have recognized careers playing one kind of role who suddenly are going to be sending themselves up. And I think that's part of what made Airplane successful, is there's this kind of understanding that these guys were all having laughs at their own expense. And that's a very endearing quality. And that's part of what made Airplane unique.
Right, and we did it once. We did it 40 years ago. It was fresh then. You know, doing the same kind of movie again with, you know, the straight, stiff, old-time actors would not be funny today. I mean, it's just been done. It's not fresh. And then I think I would expect that if somebody tried to do this style today, they would probably do that same old paint by the numbers. Oh, we'll get, whoever the straight actors are of today, like Liam Neeson or somebody. You know, it's just like they don't know what they're doing. But
it's like they would be copying you guys.
Yeah, they're trying to copy something that happened 40 years ago. A lot of times you see people attempting this style of movie and then they do puns. Well,
right.
That's also not fresh anymore. It's just puns. It was fresh when we did it 40 years ago, right. But you have to expand. There's different things are funnier today.
And so can you kind of talk about about why you did not want to go on with the Airplane 2, or was that your choice, or?
That was our choice.
Well, we couldn't think of any more jokes to do on an airplane. We want to do a different kind of movie. And actually we went to Paramount with an idea that we were really excited about. And that was, we'd have Bob and Julie land the plane and he takes her to meet his family and it's The Godfather, and then we do that. And it would still be called Airplane, but it wouldn't be set on an airplane. Right. But actually Paramount loved that idea, but I guess Francis Ford Coppola, who did the very brilliant Godfather 1 and 2, he really wanted to do 3, so they didn't want to spoof it, and I understand that too.
Wasn't there was something about airport when Howard had to go to Universal to talk with the guys because Universal Studios, who did the 3 airport movies, the Arthur Haley written series, they were upset that we were spoofing because it had never been done at that point. They thought, oh my God, we're going to end their franchise. Yeah. So they objected to us calling it Airplane, and so there was a big kerfuffle about that. And so I think we could call it Airplane in the U.S. and Canada, but this was Howard went to him And he said, just watch it and
Yeah.
then tell me. So they watched it and then they laughed. And then they said, okay, you can call it airplane here, but you got to change it in.
Yeah, so that's why in UK it was flying high, and in France it was the is there a pilot in the plane?
Yeah.
Somebody else wants to know why were you guys big Valley fans? Why that reference?
Were we what?
Big Valley fans? Why
Valley?
that reference?
Which valley?
I don't
Which
know.
valley?
It says Big Valley.
Oh, Big Valley. You mean the series, Big Valley?
Oh, well, that was, I mean, it was
There's a
one
fire in
joke.
the barn.
That was Stucker. Steve Stucker said, Nick, Heath, Jared, there's a fire in the barn. I mean, just, it was a background gag.
Yeah.
But I think Steve Stucker was a Big Valley fan.
That's that goes to what you guys were talking about earlier about improv, that you would just call Steve up and say, what would Johnny say here?
That's why we couldn't write for Stucker. So
Every word that he says in the movie, he wrote.
Oh, wow. Yeah, it's I love when they give him the paper and they say, what do you make of this? And he's like, I can make it a hat or a brooch or.
yeah, and he actually did that gag on stage in Kentucky Fried Theater for many years.
I think my favorite Steve Stucker line was just so small, so simple, but it was when Lloyd Bridges says, hey, Johnny, how about some coffee? And he said, no, thanks.
Yeah.
It just got me. Every time it gets me.
Thanks.
He's very lovable. He's very lovable.
Yeah.
So let's go on to the Naked Gun series. You guys worked together on that also. Were you guys planning after Airplane that we're going to stick together and these projects came to you, or did you make these conscious choices? And then I know your brother has gone off to do Ghost and other films, and so how did you kind of structure your career and have the path that you did? Maybe some advice for our filmmakers.
Well, I don't think we structured anything. We kind of just fell into one thing or another, and had some success and some failures. And one of the failures was a television show we did called Police Squad. Mm-hmm. And that lasted 4 episodes. They couldn't cut it fast enough. And that was when there were only 3 networks, and we still got canceled. But we prefer to say that it was ahead of its time, right, Jim?
Really, there was no master plan. What happened eventually, we did Police Squad, and then Top Secret, and then eventually we did a movie called Ruthless People. Yeah. And that was the first time, that was the only time we worked on a movie together that we hadn't written. And then, and there was no hard feelings, but the collaboration didn't work. On Airplane and Top Secret, and Naked Gun, and we were all of a single mind. But Dale Launer wrote a brilliant script for Ruthless People, but it wasn't from our mind, it was from his. So all the billions of decisions that go into movie making, how big, how small, how broad, how subtle, all those things were kind of up for grabs, and we weren't on the same page at all during that movie. I was completely lost. And so after that movie, it became clear that we didn't want to split paychecks 3 ways, that it was time for us to embark on individual careers.
Yeah, David?
That's pretty much how it happened. I remember more that it was, Ruthless People was a big hit, but our deal was not a very good. We just had to split this little paycheck. And I think we were really ready to go off on our own. So we all wrote Naked Gun together. Jim, Jerry, and I wrote with Pat Proft. And I directed Naked Gun. And that was the first movie I directed on my own. And I wrote and directed the next one, 2.5, and then produced the third. But by that time we were all very confident, and Jim did the Hot Shots movies and others. And of course, Jerry did Ghost. So I think we were all comfortable on our own.
Right.
Do you guys plan on coming back together and working together, or are you kind of just like, no, we want to do our own thing?
I've always wanted to do a project together. Again, we're just kind of looking for the right project, really. I think, you know, we all have our own interests. Jerry is working on a Broadway show, a spoof on a Broadway show, and it's a great idea. But I'm just, you know, I'm not interested in that. So we're just, and I've got my movie scripts. I've got some TV projects, and so we're you know, we have our own diverse interests and our own families, and so it's just, you know, you can't. It was wonderful that it worked great for 10 years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I just want to switch a little bit, you know, with what's happening in the world right now with COVID. How are you guys handling the industry and the changes that are happening with this whole pandemic?
I love it. I don't have to go to pitch meetings in the Valley. I can stay home. That's fine. I hated driving to pitch meetings, and then you drive and then, you know, whatever. So
do you think that'll stick?
No, I think all this is going to pass. Things will get back to normal. People will go back to movie theaters. I mean, it's just, I'm just impatient. So
yeah.
I built a tree house while I waited. You know, I'm just trying to do something.
Yeah.
And for very briefly, my life took a different direction many years before COVID. And I've run a not-for-profit foundation, and that's kept me very busy, COVID or not.
Mm-hmm. And Robert, have you been on set on anything, or how's that working?
I had some little kind of life course altering things go on, and so I've been basically homeless for the past year and a half. I was affected by the fires, the Wolseley Malibu fires. So
Bob, I pass by your tent all the time on San Vicente.
Yeah.
I've got a nice location.
It's got a big American flag on the outside. It's
got a good one. My tent is not right in the center of all the homeless. It's on what we call the suburbs.
What's the etiquette? I'm supposed to knock on the flap or something, or what?
Oh, it's if you whistling is good, or you know, just bearing gifts is good. Food, canned goods are good.
Okay, I'll come by.
And stuffed animals, but so I'm up in the marina up here. It's a real cute little place we've got, and so what I did, we moved in here in March, the day that the you know, shut down. Everyone stay inside or you're going to be thrown in prison or, you know, whatever. So we were scared that we were going to be caught moving, and we moved in 26 hours. We were up for 26 hours and we were moving just about the entire time. And so that was a heck of a thing. And then my girlfriend got hit with what we thought was the COVID virus. She was in the ICU for 9 days. And it winds up that after 6 tests that said negative, and they kept saying, yeah, but it's COVID. So finally they said, okay, so they released her. But so that's just, we've been going through all that kind of stuff. I've got a TV script and 2 film scripts that I've got partway through that I've written over the years. And I'm waiting for those to be snatched up.
Well, gentlemen, I know I'm taking a lot of your time, but I would like to have one more question. We have a great question from the audience, and I'd like to kind of end on a good note of advice. Can you talk about finding the funny during the writing process, and also how do you rely on the initial laugh during following drafts, screenings, when it is not funny to you or anyone?
Well, you know, the great thing about having a collaboration and being able to write these movies with Jim and Jerry, and then later with Pat Proft, is that we're in a room and if somebody thinks of a joke, you just get an instant reaction, whether it's like, you know, silence or a laugh. And then I know that when Jim and Jerry and I would write together, somebody would start out with a kernel of an idea, and then if it got a laugh, then somebody would add something else, and it was a real collaboration. And then you live with these jokes for a long time, and then, you know, right through the rehearsal process and the shooting process. I mean, part of the trick of directing is being able to see the joke take after take and still laugh. And so, you know, I've been able to do it. So, and I kind of talk myself into thinking that it's still funny. So, and then we evolved a set of rules that were mostly things to not do, and so we try not to make the same mistakes twice.
What are they?
Well, like, you know, for instance, you know, the first rule was always a rule we called joke on a joke. So that if there's a character in the foreground doing a scene, like if Bob Hayes is in the foreground in a scene in an airplane, you don't have, if he's making a joke, you don't have a joke also going in the background. The background has to be straight.
Like with shit hitting the fan.
Yeah.
In the foreground, you see the fan, and then the background, Stack is just walking by.
And dead serious.
And dead serious,
not
right.
trying to be funny.
And we were arrogant enough when we were making Airplane to violate that rule kind of knowingly, and it stayed in the movie. And that's when Stack and Bridges are talking, and an arrow goes in the wall behind Stack, and a watermelon drops behind Bridges, and that's just completely unrelated background and really never got much of a reaction, but we loved it, so we left it in. But I think if we were making that movie today, we would have cut that stuff.
That's a different rule than joke on a
Yeah,
joke.
yeah, right.
It's called unrelated background, as you said. So,
but they were doing basically they were doing a serious scene, right?
Right.
The focus was on them, but it was a serious scene. But that stuff happened behind them, and that was the funny stuff.
It didn't relate. It was unrelated.
Yeah.
It had nothing to do with what they're doing or talking about. And one of the rules we developed is that the background has to pertain to whatever is going on in the foreground.
Yeah, and another rule that I think of, you know, it was called "Can you live with it?" So if you do a joke like Leslie and George Kennedy in the car eating pistachio nuts, and their lips get all pink, and it gets a laugh. But then in the next scene, it's gone. We don't leave it in there. And then there was another joke in Naked Gun 2.5 when Leslie crashes through a skylight and his face is all messed up. And then he just we did another joke that he just runs his hand through his hair, and then he's perfectly made up and hair done. And so he didn't have to go through the whole scene all messed up, which wouldn't be funny.
But the most important rule was the 15th rule, which is there are no rules.
Right.
But you have to know the rules to be able to break them.
Yeah.
Right.
I want to thank you so much for coming on this morning on Saturday and spending so much time with us. And I'm sorry I went over my allotted time, but there's just so much to ask you. You men are brilliant, and you've brought so much laughter to us. And after we end the Zoom, we're going to all be cut off, so I won't be able to thank you. But I really appreciate what you've brought to the world and spending some time with us. And thank you so much. I can't thank you enough.
Thank you. It's fun.
It's a pleasure. Thanks for having us.
Thank you. Have a good weekend.
You too. Bye-bye.